Chair Davis, we are good to go.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend Smith. We are now back in open session. Colleagues, we have one item of new business remaining on our agenda, and that is to revise guidance for reopening schools resulting from the recent bipartisan agreement to return K-12 students to in-person instruction. Senate Bill 220, the Reopen Our Schools Act 2021, was signed by Governor Cooper on March 11th, and we wish to extend our gratitude to the General Assembly and the Governor for reaching agreement on this important policy item. The Strong Schools Toolkit provides the health and safety guidance for our K-12 schools. And over this past year, we have operationalized the toolkit in the Lighting Our Way Forward document, originally adopted by the board on June 11th, 2020. Today, following this discussion and assuming approval of this item by the board, the Lighting Our Way Forward document will be updated to provide clarity to our public school units on our expectations for returning every student in every school to in-person instruction as soon as possible. We commend those districts and charter schools that have already decided to return their students to in-person instruction. To begin the discussion on this item to revise guidance before the board today, I'll call on Superintendent Truitt. Superintendent.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Would you like for me to explain the need for the guidance?
Certainly.
So we're, of course, all thrilled that the legislation passed last week with bipartisan support allowed for children to return to school 5 days a week if districts choose in grades K through 5. With that option on the table, it was called to our attention that perhaps we needed to provide districts with guidance on the definition of in-person instruction. So before you see that request. Also, the charter schools were not included in Senate Bill 220, which is the legislation that reopens schools. And so the department began to receive emails and phone calls asking for some sort of fix to that, in their view, oversight. And so what you see before you is an attempt to exercise what authority we have to allow for charter schools in grades K through 5 to return to the classroom. We do not have the authority to mandate that grades 6 through 12 return to the classroom. So I will now turn it over, I'll turn it back to the chair, who will then allow Ms. Schaeffer to explain the legal ramifications of what we are asking for.
Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Schaeffer.
Yes, sir. So what is up on the screen is are the few pages of the reopening plan that put into the Lighting the Way document adopted by the state board, and these are suggested changes or additions that come out of the law that was passed last week. So in the first highlighted yellow part there, you see that this includes both the most recent version of the Strong Schools North Carolina Public Health Toolkit and the Session Law 2021-4, which is the law that the governor signed in, the agreed upon bipartisan law that the governor signed in to or enacted last week. So the 2021-4 law that became law last week says that 21 days from when the law is enacted, it shall be effective. So these guidelines take effect on April 1, 2021, because that's 21 days after the law was enacted. So no later than on April 1, the following guidelines apply. All kindergarten through 5th grade students are supposed to return to in-person instruction. The state board has defined that in this document, or will define it if they vote to approve it, at least 4 days a week, so that it's not just 1 or 2 days. It's more than that. It's 4 days a week with, and can be up to 5, depending on the option exercised by the local school district. As and this guidance covers, that part of the guidance governs charter schools K-5 as well, by the state board action. So the next item is the education of 6th through 12th grade students. Again, the new law requires that those students must return into in-person instruction either under Plan A, which is no social distancing, or regular school, the way it was before the pandemic, or Plan B, which is the 6 feet of social distancing within the classrooms. So and each school district, and again, this applies to local school districts, not charter schools, each school district may choose between Plan A or Plan B. It is their sole decision to do that. So they can either go back to full classrooms or to socially distanced classrooms. And if they go back to full classrooms, then they should be in at least 4 days a week. We understand that, or the board has articulated that under Plan B with social distancing, it may not be possible to get all students in 4 days a week, but they should be in to the maximum extent possible, still honoring the guidelines under Plan B. And then the next bullet explains that local school administrative units can choose which plan to return under, but if they choose to go under Plan A, they have to participate in the Duke University medical study that is outlined in the law. Charter schools were not provided for in session 2021-4, which is the bill that was enacted last week. My understanding was they opted out of the bill. So because they were not included, they are therefore required by session law 20-49 from a year ago that allows them to be remote. They are required to follow the provisions of the toolkit, the Department of Health and Human Services toolkit. There were 2 provisions in that law that are relevant to the charter schools. If the governing board of a public school unit determines that additional remote instruction beyond is needed to ensure the health and safety of students, they may provide remote instruction. Or if the public school unit must ensure that it is in compliance with all of the required COVID guidance related to the operation of elementary and secondary schools issued by the state board, the Department of Public Instruction, and the Department of Public Health. The state board has removed any restrictions it has by enacting this document on the charter schools going back in Plan A. However, the DHHS guidelines would not allow charter schools to go back in Plan A in grades 6 through 12. We have been working with the charter school community to try to figure out a resolution to that issue, since many of them wish to go back in Plan A, and they were opted out of the bill. And we have determined that, as a group, have determined that we need to get a slight legislative addition to allow them to go back in Plan A, and that is in the works. The last part is down in the next page, where you see the full remote learning plan. The legislation enacted in 2020, in the summer of 2020, allowed school boards and local schools to opt to close again or reclose if they find that it's necessary to ensure the health and safety of students in a particular school or district. Because this health guidance, the DHHS guidance, provides that it is now safe to go to school with appropriate precautions, the general reason that COVID-19 is out there is no longer enough to justify the closure of a school because of the determinations of our public health department. And so if a school has a particularized need to remain closed, that would, where they would be concerned about or the health and safety of their students, then there is a process for them to reclose or to not open, but it needs to be demonstrated to the state superintendent that they have a particularized need because of such things as a COVID spread among students or staff within their school. And this document would provide a process for them to submit information to the state superintendent to allow them to reclose if it's determined that they have met the statutory criteria. So, and then all students now have until April 1 to elect whether they want to go back in person or not. All students are allowed to remain out of school in remote instruction if they choose to do so. That's true of the legislation, and it has always been true. And it is an option that can be exercised by every student. For those in the virtual charter schools, for example, everyone in that school has already opted into a remote learning program. So that is a choice that's already been made. But if there are students in a school who want to come back in person, they must be provided for in person. If there are students that want to remain on remote instruction, they must be allowed to do so. I hope that explains what this document does and clarifies what the new law provides and the issue we need to address legislatively with the charter schools.
Thank you, Ms. Schaeffer. Open the floor for questions or comments by my colleagues.
Chair Davis, I do have a question.
Ms. Kamnitz.
So Ms. Schaeffer, assuming that the amendment is included and the flexibility that charter schools are seeking, as I understand for 612, is granted, are charter schools required to go to Plan A in K-5, or do they still have the option of remaining in Plan B?
Legislation as passed by the General Assembly says that they have to go to Plan A. If they are added to that piece of the legislation, they would be required K-5 to go to Plan A. And that will depend on what any legislation that's passed might say.
But right now, they are not required to go to Plan A on April 1st.
They are required by our guidance. Yes. So by this guidance, yes, they are required. That's what this document does, is all K-12, K-5 should return to in-person instruction at least 4 days a week.
Including charters.
Following health protocols. And that would include charters. Yes, the legislation didn't apply to charters. You will also see that the guidance there in DHHS says either Plan A or Plan B. Well, this state board, by enacting this document, would say Plan A, because the data has shown that the risk of likelihood of those students spreading the COVID virus is low. But again, anybody who feels uncomfortable having their children go back to school in person has an option to opt out of that.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, thank you, Ms. Schaeffer. That concludes our one new business item. Colleagues will now move to our action on first reading agenda. Is there a request to remove any one of the two items? Hearing none, I now ask for a motion to approve the following Biz Op 1 as presented and the Lighting Our Way Forward amendments for reopening K-12 public school units as presented. Is there a motion?
Reggie Keenan.
Motion by Mr. Keenan. Is there a second?
Second, Donna Tipton Rogers.
Second by President Tipton Rogers. Any discussion on this motion? Hearing none, Dr. Townsend Smith, please call the roll to capture the vote.
Yes, sir. Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor,
Yes. Yes.
Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes,
It's unanimous.
motion carries. Thank you, colleagues, for the good, quick work today. I now seek a motion to adjourn.
Lieutenant Governor Robinson.
Motion by Lieutenant Governor. Is there a second?
Wendell Hall.
Second by Mr. Hall. Dr. Townsend Smith.
Yes, sir. Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers, Dr. Tipton Rogers, Ms. White,
Yes.
Lieutenant Governor,
Yes. Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes,
It's unanimous.
motion carries. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you.